the important part of everything I've learned and all these conversations I've had is that I need to allow, especially when it's not me, someone else to have a win, to get to the end and sit and learn and understand, hey, at that very moment, that is the best possible work I could have completed. And the next time I know I can do it better. And allow that to be the encouragement rather than, hey, you were so close, so I'm going to rip it out and let's start over and see if you can do it better right now. All right, story time. So I was with. Why does my audio sound like it's echoing? I'm gonna turn that down. Oh, there we go. Maybe turn that up, turn that down. All right. Story time. So I went and looked at this new project. Just for frame of reference, it was a potential project up in Maine, and did not have a pre-construction agreement, but decided to meet with the client because it was a really cool project, really cool architect, and I wanted the opportunity, obviously, to do this project. And I go out, we meet with the client, and we're chatting and we're talking about our process, and I'm walking them through pre-construction, construction, post-construction, all of the things in terms of what how we operated, like what our process would be, how we would go through building this. It was a difficult site, and the question came up in regards to attention to detail and how we would manage that, being that we were not local, and was able to walk through that. But he said something that was really funny, and he talked about how he was obsessed with detail and obsessed with alignment, and almost quite literally we said it at the same time, but I had said I'm one of those guys that when I lay down, and I'm talking about the gym at this point, but if I lay down on a bench and I look up and I'm not aligned with the ceiling tiles, that I can't go through my workout. I have to get up and adjust my bench. And he laughed and he said, that's exactly how I am. And his wife kind of rolled her eyes and laughed and said, oh, you guys are ridiculous. This is insane. But what was funny is that, we hit it off. Like that was a really good moment for us. And we felt as though we were on the same page and understood the importance of attention to detail. But I want to share a little bit more about what that means. I want to talk about what that means to me, my business, how it's impacted my business, good and bad, and some of the conversations I've had with some people along the way. And I want to go back to an event that I went to 2 summers ago. And it was an event put on by Echelon Front. So Leif Babin and Jocko Willink were hosting it, and I was sitting down at the table with Jocko, and we were talking about my business, and he was asking what I did and asking what I struggled with, and we were talking about leadership and how sometimes I felt like I lacked or I struggled with leadership and getting my team to be on the same page as me or understand the importance of doing a really great job. And I gave him a particular example, and one of the examples was this cabinet that we had built for a project. And I get on site, my team is putting it in. It's a fine cabinet. Frankly, it's going to be a cabinet that probably gets used once a year. They're going to put some maybe blankets, extra pillows, or Christmas decorations in this cabinet. And otherwise, it's a door that blends into the plaster and you never see it. And I remember seeing it installed, and my team knew immediately and looked at me and said, "What?" And I was like, "What do you mean, what?" And they were like, "Well, you're obviously disappointed. So what's going on? Like, what don't you like?" And in the moment, I was happy that they realized that and that there was this opportunity to make it better. Looking back now, I realized that I had fatigued my team so much that I was constantly finding a better way to do something. And I communicated. I'm like, hey, I think this works, but wouldn't it be like, what do you think about, like, wouldn't it be better if we did this, or wouldn't it be better if the detail looked like that instead? And they were like, yeah, it would. And I'm like, so let's do that. And in that moment, this is before I had talked to Jocko about this, but in that moment, I'm like, great, they're bought into it. They want to redo it, and we redid it and we put it in, and it looked better, and everyone agreed that it looked better. And then we would, this would happen time and time again. I would be on site. I would see something. I'd be like, oh, this could be better. And I would encourage the team to do it again, and we would do it again, and so on and so forth. And I remember in some of our sit downs, my one-on-ones, I meet with, everyone one-on-one, twice a year. A lot of them in that year had said, Nick, I need you to be on site more. I feel like we're undoing things that, are getting too far down the line. And it's really, I really struggle with that, and I'm like, well, what do you struggle with? And I would ask the questions, and ultimately like, well, it's demoralizing. It's, we think we're doing such a great job. You show up and you have this, for lack of better terms, puss in your face, and you don't, and we know that you're not happy, and we want to make you happy, so we end up doing it again. But frankly, we thought we were doing such a good job, and it's like ripping the rug out from underneath us. And at silly me, I'm like, well, these guys are getting paid regardless, but that wasn't the reality of it. It's just they're doing the best work that they can, and I'm showing up, and what I'm doing to break it down is I'm looking at that as, hey, this is the best that they could have done for their capabilities, which is a 97 out of 100. So it's still like technically an A plus, right? And I'm here and I'm like, dude, we could get this to 99, maybe 100%, 98. Like we could get it better. And I was, trying to be better on such a small percentage. And, even though we were an A plus, I wanted to be that A plus that was, the top tier A plus. But what I was doing is I was hurting the relationship I had with my team in that moment, because I was, again, it was demoralizing for them. They had felt as though they were putting out really great work, and here I come to completely rip it out and do it again because I wanted it to be 1, 2, 3% better. And the reality is at the end of that, if the cabinet had stayed the way it was, or if the cabinet was changed to the way we end up doing it, very few, if anyone, would have ever noticed. It was such a small detail that just, it did, in the grand scheme of things, it really didn't matter. And I struggle with that because I always want to do a better job. I always want to learn and get better. And to relate it to something I talked about a couple podcasts ago, and is that truck I was building, and or that I am building. I still have it, and I forget how much of the story I told in the previous podcast, but for I'll summarize is I had this 2001 Silverado pickup truck that I souped up, and I was a kid and going off to college, or I was actually in college, second year of college, and the transmission blew, and I was in my drive. I got it back to my house, and I told my buddy, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to tear this thing apart and do a frame off restoration." And my buddy's like, "You're a psychopath. Why would you ever do that? Just fix it and drive it." And I stayed up all night and I took the truck apart, and I brought it down to the frame, and I rebuilt the frame, and I did all the suspension work, and it was cool and it was awesome. And I was putting it back together, and in that process of sharing, I had learned so much. I had learned so much about chassis work. I had learned so much about building chassis. I realized that I could do it better. And I took it apart again and I rebuilt it. And at this time, I decided to build a frame table, and I put the frame on the chassis on the chassis table, and I rebuilt the chassis, and I had done it even better than I did the first time. And in that process, I learned again to do things better. And now this time I ripped the chassis off the table. I actually built a complete chassis from scratch. And I started with all stock geometry, and I was putting it back together, all mandrel bent rails, and it was sick. And people were like, "This is nuts. I can't believe you're building your own frame." And I was putting it back together. Cab was on. I was starting to lay out wheels and tires. And again, I learned. I know this sounds crazy, and this is over a period of many years. So it probably sounds a lot more psychotic in this short few minutes here. But at this point, now I had learned so much about chassis work that I wanted to develop my own geometry. I wanted to utilize resources that I had learned about, such as water jet cutting and building. I actually designed this frame on CAD, and I actually had all of the frame rails cut out of 3/16-inch steel with these locating tabs. So essentially, you'd start on one end and locate it, and you'd weld it, and as you worked your way down, you would bend the metal and it would locate itself and connect together, kind of like a puzzle piece, as you work down the frame rail. And at this point, the frame was awesome. Frame was perfect. I had built what I wanted. The frame was exactly like how I had envisioned it. It was all adjustable. And I was putting the truck back together. And then I started messing with things like the cab and the sheet metal. And it was just this constant refinement of like, I can do better, I can do better, I can do better, I can do better. Fast forward, I bought a house, I got married, now I have 4 kids, and I still wanted the truck to get done, and I just knew I was never going to have the capacity to do it, especially building the business and this podcast and everything else that takes up my time. So what I did is I committed to working with one of the best chassis builders um, in the US. And I brought the chassis to him, and we chatted for a couple hours. My buddy and I went up there, and he took the truck apart, and he called me. He's like, "Nick, I gotta say, this is one of the better homemade chassis I've ever seen. What do you want me to do with it?" And I said, "I appreciate that, but I want you to cut it up." And he said, "You don't want to try to sell it?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, it was never done. It was never fully flushed out, and I'm not gonna be liable for someone else building off of that. I had a lot of fun learning it. I had a lot of fun refining it. And I had a lot of fun making it better and better and better. But it was time for me to let that go. And if I want this to be the best chassis that it possibly can be, then I need to work with someone that is considered the best chassis builder. Um, so here I am in a different situation where I am working with, trying to obtain, the best talent that we can in the business, but also guide and lead them in a way that they can continue to improve and refine. But I, what I need, but what the important part of everything I've learned and all these conversations I've had is that I need to allow, especially when it's not me, someone else to have a win, to get to the end and finish that, and then learn, and sit and learn and understand, hey, that's at that very moment, that is the best possible work I could have completed. And the next time I know I can do it better. And allow that to be the encouragement rather than, hey, you were so close, so I'm gonna rip it out and let's start over and see if you can do it better right now. And and there's a balance too, where if ultimately the bigger question is like, in this very moment with the tools that you have and the skill set that you have, is this the best that you can do? And if they can comfortably answer, yes, this is the best, like this is the best that I'm able to do, then we're good. It's not a matter of, it's not a matter of, undoing it because I want you to go learn how to be better and then do it again in this very moment. I need you to be operating in a way that you're producing at your very best level. Now, the flip side is we had another situation, same job actually, that we had this continuous, I think it was 12 or 14-foot long white oak step. And we were in a condo building and we could not get that material up the stairs. And I forget how we did it. I want to say we brought it in with a crane because we had a crane for something else. So we brought this piece of oak in with the crane, and the guys go to cut it to install it on the stair, and they realize they cut it in the wrong spot. And I mean, to the tune of like 7 feet short or something like that. So they dominoed it back together, the seam, and they essentially tried to fix that seam in the very moment. They tried to fill that seam, sand it, and then they literally covered it up with ram board, and it was there for maybe a couple weeks. And I remember being on site and catching a glimpse of it, and I peeled the ram board up, and I was like, "What happened?" And they're like, "I know, we tried, we screwed up. We tried to make it right. We tried to fix it, and there is always going to be a seam there." And I said, "Man, it's not going to fly. Like that is not you doing your very best. That is trying to fix something when a mistake was made. And frankly, that's a permanent mistake. You'll always see that seam." Um, and I was like, we got to get a new piece of oak and rip this out and do it again. And that's a great example of, it wasn't the best that they could do. It was the fact that they had screwed up, and they were trying to fix it, and it was this permanent issue. Like, it was going to be a permanent issue. You would always see the seam, right? So in that situation, you know, the conversation was like, listen, that mistake happened. It sucks, but it's the least expensive time to fix that is right in that very moment rather than getting it down the line further. And actually, a good friend of ours who's a cabinet maker, talked about this when he was touring us through his cabinet shop and saying that, they grade the lumber as they come in. And if anything doesn't pass the grade, even by the slightest bit, it goes in a different pile. Because what happens is if you take a piece of wood and there's like a slight imperfection, but you think maybe the painter can get it out. So we're just going to process it. Well, now you mill it down, you use it in the door, you pre-sand it, and then it goes to the finisher, and the finisher fills it, and then primes the door, and it's not quite out. So they try to fill it again, and it's not quite out. And they fill it again, and it's like, okay, it looks fine. Then they put the finished coat of paint on, and then that imperfection comes through the finished coat. Well, now there's all of this labor and all of these steps that went into trying to fix something that could have just been avoided from the very beginning by just saying, hey, that doesn't meet our standard. And this is the dichotomy of like trying to balance perfectionism with strong leadership, and encouraging people to not only make mistakes but also improve upon within themselves. And I feel like this podcast is going in two different directions actually, but my point is for me, and my role, and how I want to encourage my team, has to be, we have to do our very best job, and we can't make those compromises even at any point in the process, because the moment we make the compromise, it just snowballs into just worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And the example of grading the wood right when you see the issue, and getting it out of the process, that's the least expensive time to do it, because you just back up and reprocess a new piece of wood, and you keep going, rather than that piece of wood being on a door and then finished, and all of these steps that you have to go so far backwards that it becomes super costly. But at the same time, that the or gets all the way through, and you put it together, and it looks great, and it's passable, and it meets your standard. But you see that, hey man, next time we do that, what we should do is we should add two dominoes in the rail and style connection. Well, why? Well, I just feel like it would be stronger. Don't you feel like it would be stronger? Yeah, it would be. All right, let's redo all the doors and do that. It's like, for what? Like that's a great idea. That makes it super strong. Like you got a valid point. This will make it quote unquote better. But doing that now, these guys just, and girls, have just spent all of this time building all of these parts, and you come in last minute, and I'm talking to myself, and realize that there's a better way to do it, and you're going to implement that now. Not only does that cost the company money that you can't recoup, but you're also costing, a potential relationship with your team, where it's like, oh my God, he changed his mind again, or he's constantly trying to be 1% better. And frankly, what happens there is you drive these people to leave, and that 1% better means nothing at that point, because that person maybe is now 1% better, but they're no longer there on your team. And now you bring someone new in, you got to train them through that process. So it's a really difficult balance of trying to be perfect, and versus trying to do a great job. And I think many years ago I heard someone say it, and I tried to implement it myself. I never say anything's going to be perfect. I think I much prefer to say things will be great, and we will do a great job at it. We will not do a perfect job at it, but we will do a great job at it. And when you switch that your mindset, I think it's a little bit more forgiving, and it really encourages you to consider, hey, is this the best I can do with the resources that I have at my current moment? And if I can answer yes, then I have to keep moving forward, because otherwise it just becomes enormously expensive. Um, those that have been following the truck, because I got a lot of comments about that. I appreciate that. I will share some more maybe on my Nick Schiffer Instagram. I'll dig up some photos of it. It's cool. It's a cool project, and hopefully one day I'll have it done. But but yeah, I wanted to talk about that because it's been top of mind, and I think that it's something I struggle with, and I want to encourage my team to do their very best work, and I don't want to be the person that always rips it out and tells them that it's not good enough. Um, Final note on that. I think I know I'm hard on my kids, not in a bad way. I don't think. But the other day, I told my kids, I was like, "Hey, if you can do 20 push-ups, I'll get you a piece of candy." So my kids get down and they're doing push-ups and they're not doing the push-ups correctly. And I'm not bossing them or being militant by any means. I'm like, nope, that's not a push-up. Let me show you. This is how you do it. And I was just like on top of them and for whatever reason wanted them to do it right. And my wife came in and was like, Nick, give them a break. They're doing just fine. They're doing just fine. And truthfully, they probably got 6 really good ones, and then they just, lost the hips. Um, and I think that's what triggered this podcast. I was like, man, like sometimes I can be a little too much, and I have to remind myself that it's not going to be perfect, but it can be great. So hopefully, you find some insight on that. Um, yeah. So hopefully if you guys are interested, head over to nickschiffer.com. I do have time on there to book one-on-one calls. I've been doing a bunch of them with you guys. I appreciate the conversations. I have a lot of fun doing that. And if you guys are interested in coming to the Contractor Coalition Summit, that is in Minneapolis this year, May 15th through the 19th. It's at the Hewing Hotel. You can head over to contractorscoalitionsummit.com. It's a super awesome event. We've had hundreds of people go through this event now, and I can happily connect you with any of the people that have been. We've had some repeats, and frankly, it's a really immersive 2.5 day event that we just myself, Brad, and Morgan talk about all the things that we've implemented into our business to be more profitable. From procedures to documents that we share. We'll share behind the scenes of to like really how we run our business, and also the things that we've done that increase revenue beyond construction. So check out that website if you're interested in it and you want to talk to me one on one. Feel free to shoot me a DM at Nick Schiffer on Instagram. Be happy to chat with you about it. It is limited. I forget how far we've sold, how many we've sold so far, but it is limited to only 30 people per event. So if you're interested, please reach out as quickly as possible so we can get you registered. Yeah. And other than that, talk to you next week.